Thank you, Carol. Very, very useful information. Now it's up to you. Feed us some questions and put them on cards if you can, and then I'll decide which of my panelists could possibly answer some of these tough questions. Okay. I would like to donate my body. To whom? Oh, okay. It is now possible to sustain a brain-dead person in a semi-living condition. Let's talk about one's wish to use their body that feels no more pain in the interest of scientific and medical advancement. Use the living cadaver for experiments not feasible on another living patient. Wow. This calls for a medical ethicist. I'm not sure any of my lawyer panelists are medical ethicists. Ms.
I'm not going to attempt to answer this. Interesting question, though. And I think it is more an ethical question, but as the law stands right now, in my opinion, that would not be allowed. So it would have to be some sort of creative way, I guess, of drafting you put into a healthcare advance directive, obviously, because you're still alive, as to whether that could be done or not. But I would think that most institutions, would probably be more worried about liability than anything in doing that kind of thing. So I can see all inherent problems, throughout that scenario. Do you have a question?
No, I have a comment. I think they're increasingly realizing that there are situations where the patient cannot respond, but is perceiving. And sometimes they find that out through tapping and response, and that they accidentally do something where they realize the patient is aware and responding, but cannot overtly respond in a way that was ordinarily picking up. In a situation where they're being experimented on, they could be in pain and have no way of letting it know.
Correct. Yeah, you can see all sorts of ethical problems with that. But thank you for whoever asked that question.
And if you would, please put your questions on these little cards provided. Okay, next question. If we don't have an attorney or can't afford one, is it still better to fill in one of those templates ourselves? I'm going to let Ms. Johnson answer that.
Yes. There are all sorts of templates out there. I've included one in your file with just some ideas. But yes, it doesn't have to be written in legalese to be legal, but you just have to be clear. Just be very clear. Oh, well, that's, of course, you can't just write it out and go, well, this is good enough. It has to be witnessed by, every state is different. In Florida, it has to be witnessed by 2 people. Does it have to be notarized? I don't remember. Yeah, I know some of them do, some of them don't. It doesn't have to be notarized, but check your state law. You can Google it. Google knows everything. So, but yeah, you can do that. Yes.
What if you have no close relatives or anybody you can trust to carry out your wishes? Ms. Matansky.
Well, you must have some friends, right? You may not have relatives that would carry out your wishes. I often have people who come in, this is interesting, who say, I don't have I don't have anybody that's living anymore that I can name as my successor trustee or my PR. The healthcare advance directive is even problematic. We go through who their close friends might be, and maybe a lot of them are old, and they think, well, they're not going to survive. I've had even people then ask me, can you do this? Which in some cases, depending upon how long I've known the person, I might accept that responsibility, but it is a big responsibility. I think that there's if you think hard enough, there's probably always somebody, hopefully, that you can name, but it's not limited to relatives. It doesn't have to be. I think under the old law, it might have had to have been for the Healthcare Advance Directive, but they got rid of that requirement. And it can be, it basically can be any friend or relative, even your attorney, your CPA, something like that. I don't know if there are organizations that would take this on. Does anybody know, like an humanist, ethicist organization?
Annalita. Ann Clayson suggested that she does this for people that are part of the Ethical Society of New York here.
Yeah, I'm thinking that there are some organizations like that that will take that on, that responsibility on. So I think there are solutions to that problem.
I'm not too clear about this. I'm going to read it. 3 religions have some humanist, non-theistic ministers, leaders, rabbis. If you want this, how specific do you have to be in your documents?
Interestingly enough, I happened to be reading an article on that, and I think it came about because of the military chaplain who was a humanist who went through chaplain school and the whole bit, and then is now fighting to become a chaplain for humanists. And the question was really, is it possible, you're laying in your last moments, you're in bed, you don't want to be alone. You just want someone there to comfort you. And the thought in this article was that there are chaplains in the hospitals that will come in, not very often, but you can find them, or maybe you can find somebody that is just a non-religious group that's a religion. I don't really know who that would be because I don't go to religions. But that somebody would come in and not preach at you, but just comfort you. Just hold your hand and just go, hey, I'm here with you. You're going to take your last breath. Everything's going to be fine, and not try and scare you into hell and damnation and all that sort of stuff. So, yes, I think it is possible. And yes, you can ask for that in your advance directives. The more you ask for, the more specific. I'm going to share just a little bit. I know exactly what I want to happen when I die. I have picked out the music, everything from the 70s. I know exactly what I want played. I want it to be a party. I want them to have a blast. I have lived an absolutely outstanding life, and I want it to be a celebration. It's all written down. It's in my advance directives.
I've got a question, and I'm going to direct it to Ms. Utley. How do you know if the hospital does not say Saint somebody, if it just says, for example, in our community, Morton Plant Hospital, sounds secular, how do you know?
It's a growing problem because, as I mentioned, those Catholic health systems are gobbling up non-religious hospitals. I had a number of battles over this here in New York State, particularly in Long Island, where Catholic Health Initiatives, a system out there, was buying up other hospitals, some of them Episcopal, some of them just doctor-owned hospitals. And I tried to get conditions attached to the merger or sale that required notification of the patients about the new policies. So in one case, we got the state Public Health Council to require Catholic Health Services of Long Island to publish a notice in Newsday informing patients that there was a new ownership at the hospital and giving a 800 telephone number that people could call. However, they published it in the legal section, legal notices section, and it was very hard to find. Another time, they took over, I think it was called Mid-Island Hospital, and changed the name to like North Island Hospital or something else that didn't sound Catholic. And we went back to the Public Health Council and asked them to require that the sign include the name Catholic Health Services of Long Island so that people would know. We got that. 6 months later, we drove out to the hospital, and they had indeed put Catholic Health Services of Long Island on the sign, but it was a gigantic sign, and the Catholic Health Services of Long Island was tiny, tiny, tiny. So we took pictures. We went back to the Public Health Council, and we said, this is no good. If you were driving by this hospital, you would never see the fine print. They required them to make it a little bigger. But this is the kind of battle that goes on all the time. In the state of Washington, the advocates have done something interesting, which is there's a new requirement that the governor put out at the request of a patient rights coalition there that says that hospitals in the state have to put on their websites and send a summary of to the state health department their policies on reproductive health services, end of life, LGBT, and one other thing. I forget what the fourth thing is. So that's going into effect now, and the coalition has been busy gathering these statements. Some of them are quite specific and so helpful. Others are completely vague, as you might imagine. So now the coalition is coming up with their own website where they're going to publish all these policies of the different hospitals and publicize that to try to encourage people to at least look here and ask more questions. I don't remember the name of it, but it's connected to the Washington Coalition for Patients' Rights. It's just for hospitals in the state of Washington. It's an interesting model, and we're thinking about whether we could do that in some other states, encourage people to do it. But you have to be able to get the governor or somebody to require these hospitals to do it. And my experience trying to do this, at least here in New York, you would think, wow, we're a blue progressive state, but we have a big presence of the Catholic Health Association, New York State Catholic Conference, a lot of Catholic hospitals. I once debated a Monsignor about this before the Public Health Council, asking for notice like this, and he said, well, this would be discrimination against Catholics because you're not requiring that every hospital that doesn't have a burn center put a sign outside or tell patients on a website that they don't have a burn center. It's just if they have, religious restrictions. So we didn't get anywhere at that time, and we've never been able to get any legislation passed in New York that does anything like this, despite having great champions like Dick Gottfried, the chair of the Assembly Health Committee. It always gets defeated by the Catholic hospitals or the Catholic bishops. And even the Hospital Association of New York State is against it because they don't want any more rules on hospitals of any sort, and besides, the Catholic hospitals are on their board. So all I can say is ask a lot of questions. Again, remember I said about the uncertainty and how you have to really ask. They're not going to tell you because, frankly, I don't think people want to go to a hospital worrying that they're going to have religious restrictions on their health care, so they don't talk about it. Is there a question here?
Part of the issue that I personally have a problem with is people look at this as an issue of reproductive care and how it affects women. However, the Conference of Catholic Bishops have directives that make it so that cancer patients can't get certain treatments if it affects fertility. We've heard about the end-of-life stuff. And I just feel like that's not well enough known around the country. Are you aware of any kind of initiatives or conversations that are going on to turn to people and say, hey, this isn't just about abortion. This is also not just about end of life. This is about whether you get drugs that can cure you but might make you infertile or not. This is about what surgeries you will get that are more effective versus less effective, and Catholic bishops get to decide that for you, not your medical professional.
Right. The report that's on the table in the back, I don't know, maybe people would want to pass out some of those handouts that I brought with me. It's called Miscarriage of Medicine. It has to do with reproductive health care because that's mostly what we've been working on, and the ACLU is interested in that. We deliberately picked the title Miscarriage of Medicine and are highlighting in it something that people don't think about when it comes to reproductive health care, and that is repeated instances now of women suffering miscarriages or what's called premature rupture of membranes. Basically, your water breaks at 17, 18, 19 weeks. This is not a viable fetus. The women have no other choice of a hospital. They end up in the ER, and the hospital prohibits the doctors from terminating pregnancy because there is still a fetal heartbeat detected. This happened to an African-American woman in Michigan recently. It happened to a woman I was working with in Sierra Vista, Arizona. She was pregnant with twins, very much a wanted pregnancy. She unfortunately started to suffer miscarriage. She lost one of them at home. Husband took her to the hospital, which had just joined a Catholic health system. The doctor said, this is a doomed pregnancy. There's no hope for this pregnancy, but we really should end it now because your infertility can be affected if you get an infection, right? So you need to end it quickly. The doctor was overruled by the hospital administrators and told they could not treat her. They had to put her in an ambulance and send her 80 miles away to the nearest hospital that would treat her. And the doctor was distraught. He just said, I felt like I was forced to abandon my patient. Luckily, I mean, there is a good end to this story. This spread like wildfire through this little town of Sierra Vista, Arizona. And within a week, the hospital board said, oh, we didn't know this was going to happen when we joined the Catholic health system. We're out of here.
Thank you, Lois. Very important issue. And the short answer to the question is, if you are not an emergency admission, ask before you choose your hospital. Are you subject to the Catholic ethical and religious directives for health care? If so, choose another hospital. Okay, one more question, I think. I have knowledge of a clergy person who maintains a website saying he will be a healthcare proxy for someone for a fee. I find this unethical. Is it illegal, Ms. Smetansky?
I know there's nothing in the statute that says that it would be illegal, but obviously it would be very suspect if you chose that person to be your healthcare advance care agent or surrogate. I wouldn't trust that situation. Do you have any? Yeah, I think that would be very, very. That's creepy. Yes. Yeah. Very risky.
Well, I want to thank my panelists, Deborah Smetansky, Lois Utley, Carol Johnson. I'm very fortunate to have had these very, very knowledgeable lawyers and professionals on the panel, and thank you all for your questions.